Where is the talk of dreams at all in any home? Unfortunately, the problem is we expect Prime Minister to deliver it. And we need to have a complete change of thinking, saying we need to produce creative Indians. Now, where is the creativity in this country? Today, what really is happening is rote learning. Now, this is a problem with India. You repeat, rote learning, and finally you vomit out into the answer sheet. We have to discover the truth by ourselves. Does it come in a textbook? Do they teach you this in the IAS Academy even? The child comes home most of the time watching possibly pornography. There are no discussions, no dialogue, no communication. You have smart kids in your school, you don't talk to them because I have my so-called Facebook. As much money into this sector as possible. Let it be private sector. And they all claim to be, capital letters claim to be non-profit. Where can the 50%, 60% of Indian lower middle class and the poor go to? You have as per the Education Act, you got to have 20% of people from the neighborhood from the EWS category. Is it really happening?
Welcome back to the NEP Debate. We've been having a series of conversations on EdexLive.com with the New Indian Express about nuanced parts of the national education policy that has just been passed by the Parliament, by the Cabinet last week. Most of the conversations have centered around very, very small things like the three-language policy. They've been centered around whether the policy applies to all of India, whether there's a Sanskritization, and these are very polarized views that we've been hearing. Today with us, we're very happy to have from Kerala, we have Mr. Alphons Kannanthanam, who was a former Union Minister of State for Culture and Tourism. He's a Rajya Sabha MP with the current BJP government. He's also a member of the Indian Administrative Service at one point of time. So he knows how the bureaucracy works. He knows how government works. He now knows how policy works. And we're very happy to have him with us to discuss the NEP. Thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, to lay the context for the discussion today, everybody's talking about very small and very sort of controversial points of the NEP today, right? But I do believe that there are much bigger things at stake. For example, if we are to believe that this is the policy that will take India to a completely different future, revolutionize how children and students see the education system, I do believe that there's a lot of it that has to be cherished, a lot of it that has to be, if we don't believe in it, I don't think it's ever going to come to pass. So why don't you give us your thoughts on the NEP and what you liked and what you perhaps didn't like about it?
Yeah, right from the beginning of this committee, NEP committee, I was a member of that till I became a minister in 2017. So I would have possibly attended maybe 10 meetings. Right from the beginning, I said this entire new concept report has to be about we permitting the child to have his own dreams. I think that must be the focus. Today, what's happening is, where is the talk of dreams at all in any home? The child's best friend really should be the parents, number one, and number two, it should be the teacher. Today, the child's biggest enemy are the parents, and of course, followed by the teacher, telling you why you can't dream at all. I mean, it is basically, they want a photocopy. Whatever dreams I couldn't achieve, I want my child to achieve. I mean, this is the kind of education which we start right from home, because I don't even blame the schools. It starts at home, this entire, indoctrination saying, you follow my dreams, whatever I want to tell you. The child is never asked what his dreams are. No, he's never given the opportunity. And once he joins a school, it's the same rat race. And, you have an entrance examination for nursery classes where 1,000 children apply, 950 are rejected, and 50 people get selected. So the child feels, oh, I'm a genius. Rest 950, the danger is that he gets feeling, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm useless. Right when he's just 2.5, 3. So I think it's tragic. So I said, this entire policy must be to enable children to dream for themselves, to discover knowledge by themselves, let them be. I mean, this was, I said, must be the focus. And I'm extremely happy. This philosophy actually permeates down the entire new education policy. So I'm very, very happy about this.
Is there anything that you think could have been done better if you had been a part of the committee? And, of course, you left the committee because you became a minister and, of course, politics took over. But if you had been a part of the Kasturi Rangan committee to the point where the draft passed and now the policy itself has come into force, is there anything that you would have done differently? Enhanced it, perhaps?
I think everything that we need to have there is there, really, absolutely speaking. See, it is left to the school and the teacher really in the classroom ultimately to deliver. We could write a beautiful report. We have done that before in India. It's not that our documentation was bad, because my tribe of the IAS officers and they're all very good in documentation. The entire problem with the country is the delivery in the classroom ultimately, and of course, this entire attitude change of the parents saying that let him be, isn't it? So these two things, unless this happens, the big revolution has to start at home. Number one. And number two, of course, it has to be delivered in the classroom by the teacher. Now, are we able to do that? So the documentation is fine, beautiful, but will the delivery take place? It all depends on the kind of determination that our system has. Unfortunately, the problem is we expect Prime Minister to deliver everything, the Education Minister to deliver everything, or the Prime Minister do it. See, the Prime Minister of a country which has got 1.3 billion people, ultimately, unless each of us begin to dream and support that great dream of the Prime Minister and the Education Minister, nothing is going to happen. So ultimately, it's left to the schools, ultimately to the teacher in the classroom, and of course to the parents to change things. Otherwise, as a document, I think it's fantastic. It's perfect.
One of the things that you brought up, of course, is that they say the devil is in the details. And here, the biggest challenge, I think, is going to be implementation of the things that the policy hopes for. Would you agree with me, sir?
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely left to the implementation, how we are going to do it, how the states are going to take it seriously. Now, take, for example, the ease of doing business. I think after Modi became Prime Minister, we have made dramatic improvement. How many? We have jumped something like 75 slots in this ease of doing business. But is it really reflected on the ground in many of the states? No, because the bureaucracy at the ground level, especially which is supposed to issue the permits finally, the panchayats, municipal corporations, and I mean, they don't change. It's the same permit charge operating, which is corrupt, which is inefficient. So it all depends down the line. After all, education is a concurrent subject, is to be implemented by the states, and therefore it all depends on the kind of commitment, initiative, and the dramatic change which is required. Now, if you take the history of the world, let me just quote one country, South Korea. When they became independent, they're much more poor than India. But when they became independent, said the first 25 years, our focus is going to be on education. And that is what is going to lead us to the takeoff. That's what exactly they did. They taught humanities, they taught technology, and in 25 years, look at the kind of dramatic change they were able to achieve because they focused on education. So that's a commitment, that kind of commitment which we require in this country, right from the government of India, which has shown great courage in bringing out this initiative, to the state governments, right down to the panchayat level, because most of the primary schools, Anganwadis, ultimately are run by the panchayats. And then, of course, the Jilla Parishads, they run the high school. So it has to permeate down to that level. And we need to have a complete change of thinking, saying we need to produce creative Indians. Now, where is the creativity in this country? I mean, I'm very sorry to say. There's very little. And today, what really is happening is rote learning. Like, I'll tell you an experience which I had. This is when I was Higher Education Secretary of Kerala. The girl who was a topper in Kerala in the board examination, her pictures were on every television channel, front, prime, lead news, all the newspapers, front page, color photograph. We gave her a huge reception in Trivandrum in the main hall, government hall. The Chief Minister was there, Education Minister was there. After the meeting, when we came down from the stage, I asked this girl, hey, you are the most brilliant girl in this state. What are you going to do with your life? She thought for a long time, and then you know what she told me? I'll go home, I'll ask my mother, and then I will tell you. Now, this is a problem with India. You have kids scoring 100 out of 100. Forget about mathematics. I can understand in mathematics and physics, maybe. And maybe in chemistry also. Imagine in history, literature, political science, scoring 100 out of 100, 499 out of 500. Why? There is a simple formula. And what is that formula? The teacher brings a note to the classroom, and how did that teacher get her note? Because her teacher has taught her. How did that teacher get it? Because her teacher had taught her. You write down, she dictates, and you take down the note without leaving a full stop or a comma. Then you go for tuitions at 5 o'clock in the morning, at 10 at night, when you're supposed to see beautiful dreams. The kid is sitting at the back of a scooter, all sleepy, reaching the tuition teacher's house. You repeat, rote learning, and finally you vomit out into the answer sheets, and you get 499 out of 500, 100 out of 100. What is the point? It is finally this. I will go home, I'll ask my mother, and I will tell you what I'm going to do with my life. This is exactly what the Indian education system is. I'm sorry, this has to change dramatically. That is why The whole lot of focus, if you see at various stages, is on discovery. That word is used very often. Experimentation, group activities, learning from the field, from various experiments. So I think the whole lot of focus is going to be away from rote learning into actually you discovering truth. Who am I? Or even the parent or the teacher to tell a child, this is a truth and this is what is happening in India. And we accept that as a truth. Sorry. We have to discover the truth by ourselves. Nobody is going to tell you. Like when I came as Commissioner of Delhi Development Authority in 1992, government land was being encroached. Nobody did anything. Ultimately, I told my people, let's start with the biggest criminals. And in 5 years, my people, we demolished 14,310 illegal mansions in Delhi. Does it come in a textbook? Do they teach you this in the IAS Academy even? No. These are things you got to learn by experimentation. You got to tell yourself, I'm born here to change the world. This is what I keep telling children. You must change the world. This must be the topic of discussion at every dining hall, in every family, not in the school. You must start from home. When Kennedy became president, he was asked, how come you became president so young? He said, my presidency was created at the dining table. Every child had to be there, and there would be discussion on national, international issues, and even the tiniest child had to participate.
A cultural issue that we've sort of out of touch with, because I know that when I was growing up, because there wasn't as much television, the internet didn't really exist. We had a lot more dining table conversation, which today does not happen. Do you think that this is a cultural issue?
I don't know where to call it a cultural issue, lifestyle. Today, you see, it's even much more in this digital age. Earlier, they had to tolerate the children because the only entertainment was television, and therefore, at least they sat together in the drawing. Today, the child comes home, doesn't even say hello to the parents because the parents are possibly never there, and he's back in his room with his mobile, testing his girlfriend, and most of the time watching possibly pornography. Now, parents do not care. There's a good riddance. I don't have now my kids sitting on my head. Today, are children dining with the parents? No. The only time when they don't have tuition and when they are away from their mobile is the dining time. So they grab the food, rush to the television. That's the only time when they all sit together possibly. Or when they don't sit together possibly, parents still have the dining on the table. Where is the communication? The parents today have completely I won't even say delegated because nobody else can take over parenting. There are no discussions, no dialogue, no communication. So this is one of the biggest curses of the digital age, even though digital age can be used amazingly. Like I have formed a WhatsApp group during this coronavirus. Sitting at home, I've done more work than when I was a minister. We provided 1 million meals by a group of people who had never met. Look at the incredible power of the digital age. But at the same time, it takes you off communication with your parents, with your friends. You don't need friends anymore. You're trying to make friends with somebody in Kyrgyzstan or whoever. You have smart kids in your school. You don't talk to them because I have my so-called Facebook. What a waste of time. I think let's focus on communicating with children at home, discuss topics in the school. From moment number one, the teacher enters, it's all about dictation. Why shouldn't the teacher take the first 10 minutes, only 15 minutes of our classroom time to talk about the world, about the suffering humanity? That you child, you must dream, you must make a difference. So learn things in this classroom. How many parents or teachers have the guts to tell the child, hey, the biggest equipment in your body is not even your brain, it's your backbone. The ability to stand up and fight, stand for the truth. How many? Tell me. These are things which we never taught.
So coming back to the implementation of the policy itself, one of the most compelling bits that the Kasturi Rangan committee has put in there is that they've talked about how in both the previous policies, both in the 1960s as well as 1986, the policies mentioned that 6% of the GDP would be allocated to education. Now, this has been something that we're looking at and hoping for let's say the most part of independent India. The 2020 National Education Policy that has also been passed says that we will work towards getting 6% of the GDP allocated towards education. Do you honestly believe that this is something that we can achieve, or do you think that it is an aspiration, a pipe dream, something that may or may not happen? Because you know that we've worked ourselves up to 3, then 4, and it varies between somewhere between 3 and 4.5% every year. Do you believe that it is actually possible to hit 6% of the GDP for education?
I don't think we have a choice. We are the youngest nation in the world with the largest number of young people. Now, tell me, it is turning out to be actually a curse. We have millions of young people who are coming out, either not going to school, dropping out, or even graduating, even engineering graduates who don't know anything about what, even their own domain knowledge. No clue. We don't have choices. I mean, the state where I come from, we invested huge amount of money on education, and you can see the results there. I mean, this didn't start with the present government or even independence. It started with the kings and with the churches and other community organizations involving themselves, putting huge amount of money into the school and college education. The results are there to see. Take, for example, one of the fallout of this, family planning. Today, every family in Kerala accepts family planning. Even when it is against your religious beliefs. Like, I'm a Catholic. My church bans any form of family planning, but let me tell you, I, as a collector, I won 3 awards for best collector, and one of the components was success in family planning. My district, Kottayam, is a Christian district, very the heartland of Christianity. So with education comes even your ability to think beyond religion and to think independently and say, this is good for me. Now, we need to put money. We don't have choices. If you want this young generation to be young India, to be our strength, we need to put money there. We can't have classrooms in the open under a tree. We need to have genuine classrooms with equipment, with the digital technology, because we don't even know when this virus is going to go away. And therefore, today I see the divide even becoming even bigger, because my organization, my WhatsApp group, Distress Management Collective, is also trying to get at least a phone, a smartphone into homes, because otherwise the child is left without an education. So even the rich today are having a much better opportunity of education than the poor people. They are left behind. But today the divide becomes even bigger. So it's all the more so important that we reach out, these equipments to the village schools. At least if it's a village school, the children can come there. Is it there? No, the buildings are not there. Bihar, where I've gone as an election officer, isn't there. Most of North India don't have these basic facilities or even having classroom. If there are 5 classes, there is 1 classroom, 2 classrooms. There are not enough teachers. Many of the teachers are absentees and many of them are not qualified. So this whole issue, we just got to spend the money. We got to find the money, because this is what the world did. Wherever they have made huge progress, they have spent money on education. We don't have a choice.
The NEP also talks about how there's unspent balance. There's a huge amount of unspent balance in various institutions and sectors involved in the education. And it's not just the unspent balance. Last year, Center for Policy Research had brought out a pre-budget report, which talked about how only 57% of the total allocation for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan had been disbursed by the end of December 2019. The problem with disbursal, less disbursal, or funds being parked, how big a problem is it?
No, it's a big problem. I think this is where, you see, the money is mostly transferred to the state institutions, I guess. This is where the implementation takes place. Now, if you, number one, I think the expenditure on the monetary expenditure is really not the yardstick. What's the kind of quality that you have created? I think that is even more important. But the very fact that was not spent, I think the state governments, most of them just sit on it. I don't really know whether you have people who are interested in education becoming the education ministers in the states. I don't know. I think you need a special competence, core competence to be an education minister of a state. How many are really qualified? Number 2, do you put the best officers in your cadre in the education department ministry? Because I was higher education secretary of Kerala. I worked in the general education department of Kerala. I was also commissioner for entrance examination. Do you put the best people there, and do you allow them to continue? Like, generally it takes 3 months to bring out the engineering medical entrance examination result. When I was a commissioner, you know how many days we took? 7 days. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. 6 newspapers wrote editorial saying the entrance commissioner's office gets a first rank. But I was removed the very next day because one of the ministers, he called me up, I met him, and he asked me to replace an income certificate of a boy so that he becomes a backward class boy and he will walk straight into a medical college. I called him a criminal and I walked out. Next day I was removed from my post and put into our little room as big as a toilet for the next 4 years. Therefore, do you allow the most competent people to be in the education ministry, who are not sitting in the secretariat, willing to travel to the village schools, see how the teachers are teaching, and see the competency levels. And beyond that, of course, are we allowing the children to dream? See, are we doing that? Unfortunately, my answer is no. So you can spend all the money at the same time not really get the outcomes.
There's also the problem of just the disbursal part, which means that we are allocating funds, but the center or the state, whichever responsible government it is, they're not sending the money to the concerned institutions. ICSSR is one of the institutions that has been dealing with these types of problems for quite some time now. There are other institutions as well. State, like you said, has the same problem. Are we just allocating money in the budget saying that, you know, we are spending 99,000 crore for education and then just sending only half of it? What picture does that sort of show that the disbursal is not enough? Spending is not there, but disbursal also is hampered.
Yeah, since I was in the government for a long time. See, the disbursal generally from the government of India to the states and to institutions take place based on the expenditure. So if you have spent 25 crores, the government of India will probably reimburse that 25 crores. Now, if these institutions and the state governments are not spending the money and they make a second request, the government of India will say, please spend the money, at least 50%, 75% you spend, then you get back to me, I'll give you the money. So I think the whole problem is at the implementation level. People are not spending the money on time. And of course, they're like quarterly, quota is there. If they don't spend the money, if they come at the last moment, government of India will say, sorry, I can't give you all that money right now because you didn't really consistently spend over a period of time. So I think education is not a top agenda for most state governments. This has to change. Education and healthcare really has to become the biggest challenges, putting the best people out there, make sure that the money goes there.
The document also talks about mechanism of performance-based funding. Like you said, to states and higher education institutes, which will be devised. Do you think the education policy, the new education policy, what it says about the new disbursal system, it's enough? Or do you think the center needs to do more to be more stringent and have more laws so that the state will comply and spend properly, spend it in the right places?
Yeah, I think center needs to monitor a lot more. But the whole problem is center doesn't have a huge infrastructure of people who can go and monitor. See, we are a federal country, and therefore we depend on the states for most of the implementation. And we can tell them, this is what we think should be done. This is why we are giving you money. Please spend it. So ultimately, most of it has to happen at the state level. They must say, okay, this is our priority. We want to, we want to judge not only just a competence, which is a very key word in this document. We have to go beyond that, and we have to create children who are creative. I think that is, how do you test creativity? Now, according to me, even this entire examination system must change. Rote learning must go. I think you should all have open book examination. So no child can just study by heart, okay, and come and reproduce. Have open book. Ask him about what he feels about things. How much does he know about the universe, about our tiny planet, where we pride, human being prides that, yes, I'm the king of the universe. What? You are not even a speck. Tell the child. Don't get arrogant. How much does he know about the forest, about the rivers, about the birds? Like I feed about 500 birds in my house during coronavirus, including about 200 or 300 eagles and 25 species. Why? Because what is Indian philosophy? Vasudeva Kudumbakam. What does it mean? It's not only that humanity is one, you and I are one, but it goes beyond that and says the entire universe is part of me. The entire planet Earth is part of me. The entire flora, fauna, living, non-living, the rivers, the rocks, the plants, they're all part of me. Are we willing to teach all these things to the children and examine them based on those things, knowledge? And of course, the domain knowledge is very important, extremely important. But domain knowledge alone is not sufficient at all to set a man on fire. It's not. He has to be on fire for the nation.
So you spoke about federalism, and you talked about the inherent center-state conflict when it comes to implementation of programs, fundings. These are long-pending things that in India we've almost come to live with. Editorials have been written, policies have been written, studies have happened, and we still find ourselves in a place in 2020 when the federal nature of the country leaves a constant conflict between center and state when it comes to funding. Would you go as far as to say that if states, especially the non-BJP ruled states, if they were to impede the policy in its implementation in spirit and in actual practice, would you go as far as to say that it's children who will suffer in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. See, the ultimate sufferer is a child. See, especially education, if you take it, the government of India can only broadly lay down the guidelines, provide the necessary money, some part of it. The states have to pitch in because it is fundamentally it's a state baby, though it's in the concurrent list. And therefore, states have to put enough money. You can't just say, sorry, this is what is available. No. I mean, take for example, Delhi. I'm a socialist. I'm a Keynesian. I want money to be spent on the poor. Your bulk of your money today is going towards free electricity and free water. Good thing people can't afford. But the point is, how much money are you spending on education? How much on healthcare? How much are you spending? So these are the things. You do things right from day one to win elections only. I think the moment you should win elections, I'm not saying don't keep promises. You must keep your promises. But why are you making such promises which take away money from your core sector, which I think is education and healthcare are the most important things? Why aren't you doing it? No, because it's so easy to say free electricity. Whose money is it? Is it the chief minister's? No, you and I pay for it, isn't it? It's so simple. Yeah, one order and he will win elections. I think we just have to change and say the money must be spent by the states on education. I think even your devolution of funds should specifically say, after we have increased the devolution of funds from 32% to 42%. Dramatic improvement. Therefore, you should say, okay, X amount of this money will go only for education. And we want changes. We want changes. And that change has to take place in competency, in your ability to think independently, in your creativity. All this must be actually accessible. And it's not difficult to assess these things. I think the entire examination system, let them write with the books, let them write from home, let them but talk about life. How would I do if I was in that position? That is the kind of examination we need to have.
That's a very revolutionary idea, especially because Delhi University and the open book issue, we've just in fact heard that the High Court has allowed the open book exams in Delhi University. So it's a contentious issue. But to end the discussion on probably a interesting note, one of the things that the NEP talks about is, though the government, of course, is tasked with funding the education system primarily, they talk about how this cannot be done without private participation. And they'd call upon philanthropic bodies, private philanthropic bodies and trusts to come forward to take the education forward to places where the government is not able to handle that linkage. Now, as somebody from Kerala, as somebody who has been in the administrative service, as somebody who's been a politician, and as somebody who's, do you see this as technically a good move to bring in more private participation? Or do you in fact have a fear that there might be an opening for more corruption, for gaming of the system, and so on and so forth? What are your views, sir?
No, I think since the government doesn't have enough money, I think we should get as much money into this sector as possible. Let it be private sector. They should come in. When I was higher education secretary in Kerala, I allowed private professional colleges to come up. That's how we created 2 lakh seats in Kerala in engineering, medicine, nursing, MBA. I think it's a fantastic thing. We need to do that. Involve the private sector. Some of those colleges which came up are fantastic. And therefore, I think there's a huge space for involvement of the private sector. But I really think this shouldn't really lead to a divide. Number one, only the moneyed people can go to these private colleges, schools, and universities. I think it's completely wrong.
It's still an issue in 2020 in India. And understandably, of course, it's mostly with the engineering and the medical colleges which are privately run.
No, even schools. I mean, private schools today are thriving, many of them. I mean, and they all claim to be, capital letters claim to be non-profit. Take one of the biggest universities in Delhi, nearby, I won't name it, it's a private university, claims to be non-profit, charges exorbitant rates. That's what most of them do. Your private schools, some of them charge exorbitant rates. Where can the 50%, 60% of Indian lower middle class and the poor go to? You have as per the Education Act, you got to have 20% of people from the neighborhood from the EWS category. Is it really happening? So it's not even astounding intelligence in terms of scoring marks, which is important. I think it's a question of commitment to the nation. It's a question of that backbone saying, I will make that difference. In fact, that's the title of my book, Making a Difference.
In addition to the private institutions coming up or helping them set up, the NEP also talks about how public institutions can now take funds from philanthropic institutions or philanthropic funds to enhance educational experience. Do you think if private money comes into the public sector, there will be a clash of interest? There might be some problems arising from that?
Not really. I mean, as long as the money comes untied, of course, subject to, of course, they themselves also prescribing certain minimum standards of competence, education, and also creativity. I think it's fine, not a problem. But the problem in India is how many people are donating to charity? You tell me. I'm not in awe of the white man at all, but 40% of Americans contribute to charity. How many percent of Indians are contributing to charity? And even the little charity which is there, because as per CSR, now you can donate also to education. So it's a law that you have to spend X amount of money on CSR. Most of the families, big companies have set up an in-house NGO to manage even that money. Whether all that money reaching people, or is it round tripping happening back to the family? So the money, the kind of generosity that exists across the world, most of the countries don't exist in India. People, corporates don't give away money at all. It's just a fraction in spite of the law. Then they have created, I told you, this family trust, which takes care of the CSR. And therefore, I don't really think it's a big option. But whatever comes, I think we should take it because it's good for our future generations. We don't have enough money.
Should we then make education for profit? Will more private players come in? And even though it's non-profit right now, there's a lot of underhand business that goes on, especially in smaller and medium private schools and colleges. Do you think if we make it for profit, that might end? Because everything will be over the table.
I don't really know, Mr. Das, because there are global models of, finest universities being run by private trust. I mean, from Harvard to Princeton to everything else. I mean, I don't know whether they call themselves not for profit. Maybe, I think these are all terminologies. But one thing I'm very clear, education must reach the last man out there. Because we can't afford, we can't say your child can't go to school, you are in a slum, you can't wear a uniform and go to a public school. Sorry, no. I think it must be accessible. So we got to reconcile. We need more money to come into education because we don't have enough money. There must be more contribution from corporate, private to government established schools to make it better. Like in Calicut, one of the companies there has adopted one of the schools. Today, it's one of the best schools in the world. I'm not really saying in the country. Some have done it. So if you have your heart in it, yes, it's possible.
Do feel free to like, share and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.